Welcome back from Thanksgiving break. We're going to jump in with crime scene investigation. And so let me just go ahead and tell you a couple things before we get going with this. You'll want to pay attention to it. You'll want to not just click through the slides. You'll want to watch the entirety of the video. And I'll probably be giving you some information that you'll need to know that's not just specifically written on the slide itself. So please take the 10-15 minutes that this video is going to run and actually watch it. So we're going to look at actual crime scene investigation. Some of this is a little bit of a repeat of the first video that we did that was just kind of an overview. So we're going to go a little bit deeper, and we'll probably go a little bit even deeper in class. There's going to be 2 parts at least, if not maybe a 3rd part I'll add to it, to this video. Okay, so physical evidence. This was a little tag from our book there, but as automobiles run on gasoline, a crime lab runs on physical evidence. You have to have physical evidence to be able to really process physical evidence. And so physical evidence is, and you need to know this definition, it's any object that establishes that a crime has been committed and has a link between a victim and a perpetrator. Okay, that's physical evidence. And so you don't always know at a crime scene what is actually going to cause that link. So when you get to a crime scene, everything is physical evidence. Okay, so for physical evidence to be used effectively, you must be recognized at the crime scene. That's what I'm saying. Anything that's at the scene itself is going to be considered physical evidence. Okay, forensic science. You need to know this as well. It begins at the crime scene. It's not that once the evidence is tagged and then sent to a lab that's when forensic science begins. It begins at the crime scene itself. So it's very important that the investigator can preserve it, and because if you have messed up physical evidence, it doesn't matter how good your lab equipment is. You cannot use tainted evidence, and so you have to make sure that it's actually preserved and taken care of properly. Along the same lines, they need to be able to recognize it. It's a little bit of a repeat, and preserve evidence for laboratory examination. It must be emphasized that the techniques of crime scene investigation are not difficult to master, and any average police officer can do this. It's not something where you necessarily have to have some sort of expert come in. It's the main thing is don't mess anything up, and know how to properly bag and take care of evidence. And we'll get into that in a little bit more detail. So the first steps, we've had a crime here. Humpty Dumpty, it appears, has fallen. The first officer is the one who is responsible, who arrives at the scene is the one who's responsible for securing the scene. First priority, this should be common sense, but first priority, you need to know this, should be given to obtaining medical assistance for anyone who needs it and arresting the perpetrator. So if you show up to the crime scene and someone is being beaten, someone's being murdered, someone's being raped, something horrible like that, you wouldn't be like, hey, hold on just a second while I secure the crime scene. You would take care of the individual, you would stop the crime from taking place, and you would do those things first before securing the scene. So then as soon as that is possible, okay, say the perpetrator is gone, say the person is either beyond help or help has come, then you have got to keep unauthorized personnel away from the crime scene. Because what's going to happen, you're going to have creeper neighbors come over, just wanting to know what's going on. You're going to have, potential witnesses that will be, either coming onto the scene. You have to make sure that you keep that scene secure. Okay, even from other cops. Let's say you just have cops come in and traipsing around. Remember when we looked at the OJ trial, there was such an issue with cops who were stepping in blood, and there were bloody footprints everywhere. Okay, you have to make sure that the only authorized personnel are on the scene and that they're doing what they're supposed to, or you get them out. Once the scene is secured, then you have the preliminary exam. We'll talk more in detail about the preliminary exam here in just a second, but here's some of the stuff that goes on with these first steps. You've got to record the crime scene. Okay, you have to know everything about it. So here's some of the recording methods. Photography, that of course is a big one. We'll do some stuff in class of how to take pictures of evidence, and we'll talk more about it in just a second. Sketches. We're going to be doing sketches very, very soon, actually. In next class, we'll be doing some crime scene sketching. And so you'll need to pay very close attention to that portion of it. And so crime scene sketches and notes are 3 methods for crime scene recording. There's also video. Now, I had the question asked many times when we did the inquiry-based scenes of why would we not just take pictures of the scene instead of sketching? Well, pictures don't show distance. They don't show how things are actually laid out. And so while pictures are fantastically important, a sketch actually gives you a breakdown of how everything is laid out. Okay, so if you just handed someone random pictures, they wouldn't necessarily be able to get a real good view of what the room was like. But if you have that sketch with the pictures, then all of a sudden you have a good idea of it. So, ideally, you should have all of them employed. However, nowadays it's not so big of a deal. People have cameras on them all the time, generally with their phones. But best case, you should have all three employed. So, with photography, the most important prerequisite, is for that the crime scene is unaltered. You don't move anything around before you take pictures. I mean, I know that makes sense, but it's not like, hey, I need to get a better picture of this. Could we move it over here? No, because now you've tampered with evidence. And so, unless there is someone where there's an injured party, you should not move them until everything has been photographed from necessary angles. If there is a dead body there, you don't move that dead body until you have taken pictures at all different angles to show how things were laid out. Obviously, like we said, it's common sense. If someone is laying there like, I'm dying, you would be like, hey, hold still just a second, let me snap a couple of pictures, okay? Are you good? Of course. So as items of physical evidence are discovered, you photograph them to show their position and their location in the entire scene. And so after you have taken kind of these broad pictures around the room of all the walls, ceilings, everything, then you take close-up pictures. And so when the size of an item is significant, you need to show something, of how, as a point of reference to show how large it is, to show the scale of it. So if you've ever seen, sometimes if there's a picture of something small, somebody may put like a quarter next to it to show what it looks like next to that quarter. Okay, because sometimes it's difficult to determine from a photograph how big something is. Or you would have a small ruler, that shows scale, or you would have some little kind of tape that shows things by a centimeter size, so you can determine, what the scale is of an object. Sketches. Pay attention to this. Okay. Once photographs are taken, as a matter of fact, hold on just a second. I'm going to see how well you're paying attention to this. Number 3 on the quiz, the answer is B. Okay, so just know that. Number 3 on the quiz, the answer is B. We'll see who watches the video. Okay, so once your photographs are taken, the crime scene investigator will sketch the scene. 2 different kinds of sketches. One is the rough sketch. This is just a draft that has essential information and measurements. We'll look at one in just a second. It's drawn at the crime scene, and so it has all recovered physical evidence as well as any important features of the crime scene. So let's look at this rough sketch. I know it's going to be kind of hard to see. But you see up at the top, there's a lot of information there. It has the case number, has the address, the date, the time, what happened. There was a homicide. You see that it has the victim, who was actually investigating and who assisted. And so you have the scene laid out. Okay, we have what appears to be, I guess, the first floor or so, or I guess a single-story home there. And so you have the walls are measured out, and this is not drawn perfectly to scale, but it has all of the actual dimensions. The wall on the right is 26 feet, going across the bottom. Okay, I can't fully actually read what this says. I think it says 19 feet and 10 inches. And so they've measured all of the walls, has the layout of the different furniture. Even if you look like where the chair is, it tells you how far that chair is from the wall. Okay, and so it has these different characteristics. You see on the top left-hand side, you see that there is a body that's drawn there. You see the angle of it, and you see that there are very precise measurements that are done to show where that body is in relation to the wall. Okay, so that you have an idea of what the spatial awareness is, because you might not have access to that crime scene ever again. This is very important, especially when you're talking about like an outdoor crime scene, okay, where you might not be able to get perfect dimensions if you go back to the scene. So, and you also notice that there's a couple of things that are added here. You see that all of those little black triangles that you see, those are actually the angles where photographs were taken. And so you can know whenever you look at the photograph, the angle of which that was taken. You also have a key there where things were written out. Like you see the telephone there, and it has the letter B next to it, and you have a key down at the bottom that tells you where the telephone is. Okay, you see that there is a bullet hole, you see that there is blood stains, you see that there are shell casings, and so all of these things are measured. And so it's very important that you get detailed measurements. It's very important that you have a detailed key of your evidence. Okay, so keep that in mind because we'll be doing that. Then you get to your finished sketch. This is much more precise. It's generally drawn to scale. Actually, a lot of times it's done with computers, but you can also do it with really nice graph paper and just do a really good sketch of it. This one is you want this to look nice. This actually might ultimately be what's used in court even to talk about this. This is the same one that we just looked at. Now, obviously, this is a lot neater. Okay, and so you see that it has all of the same things. It has the angles of the pictures. Okay, and now picture it kind of turned the other way. But it has the chair. It has those dimensions of where everything was at, and so it's the same placement. And it would also, if you had a larger thing, it would have the key on there as well, or where the evidence is. But very important though that that final sketch is drawn to scale, so you know exactly how the room was laid out. Okay, note taking, so important. You have to constantly take notes. That's why whenever we did the inquiry-based scene, I wanted you to see you write down every observation that you possibly could. And so you don't ever ask the question, should this be here? No. If you're taking notes, if it's on the crime scene, it's there. So it doesn't matter if it should be there or not. They need to have a detailed written description of the scene with the location of items recovered. Let's say something happens to your sketch or anything like that. You need to know where these things are at. Things that you must identify with your notes. The time that physical evidence was discovered, who discovered it, how it and who packaged it and marked it, and then the disposition of them after it was collected. What condition was it in after it was collected? Now we'll wait a little bit more from doing some evidence collecting, but this is something you do need to know, especially for the quiz. I'll ask some things about that. The note taker has to keep in mind that this written record may be the only source of information for refreshing one's memory. Okay, you're giving a full account of what happened, because it might be that tomorrow that crime scene you're never able to go back to it. Okay, let's say that it's a house and you have the crime scene, somebody burns the house down the next day. You don't have access to that scene again. You have to be able to recall as much information as possible. Recording the crime scene, you only have a limited amount of time. That's what I was saying. You have a limited amount of time to work the scene when it's in its untouched state. The opportunity to permanently record the scene must not be lost, so you have to get on that immediately. And so these records not only provide information in the investigation, but they also could be used in the trial itself to show how things actually went down in a crime. So every step has to be documented with appropriate method. Real quick, we'll run through the preliminary exam. The lead investigator is the one who actually starts the full process of evaluating. First, you determine what's the boundaries of the scene. Generally, it's a little bit larger than if it's outside. You're not just going to take where the body is and put tape around the body. Okay, you would have a larger area. You try to determine where the perpetrator entered and exited. Okay, that might determine where your scene, how big your scene is. And then you do an initial walkthrough to gain an overview of the situation and to develop, okay, how are we going to actually examine and document the scene? So the search itself, it's got to be thorough, which means you leave nothing behind, and systematic, meaning you have an actual process. Okay, you don't just show up and be like, let's look around. Yeah, I see some stuff over there, some stuff over there. Done. Okay. Search patterns are important because there's different ways to search. You need to know these different search patterns. There's the spiral search where you would start in the middle or start on the outside and you would work your way, and so you're covering all of the ground. Okay. Grid method would mean that you would go and kind of think mowing a lawn. Okay. Where you would go, well, I guess it's more of a crosshatch. You would go up and down, and then you would go back, okay, around the scene to make sure that you didn't miss anything. The strip or the line search, that's more like mowing the yard, okay, where you're going to go up and down the scene. Or if it's a very large area and you have a lot of personnel, you can do a quadrant where it's like, okay, we're going to break the scene up into 4 quadrants or more or multiple zones, and I'm going to take this scene and I'm going to search it. Okay, and so you've got to look for everything. You cannot overlook evidence. And so your physical evidence can be anything from a gun laying on the ground. It could be, to microscopic traces of blood or fingernails or anything that could be, or even fingerprints anywhere on the scene. And so often many items are clearly visible, but some things can only be detected at a crime lab. So it's important that you gather anything that you possibly can. Okay, and so you'll use things, even vacuum sweepings, fingernail scrapings, anything needs to be bagged up and taken. And we'll talk about later some of the methods for doing, because obviously the way that you would handle a gun would be different than the way you would handle like a swab of someone's mouth. And that is going to be it for today. Take notes, do well on the quiz, come in ready on your next class period. I won't say which day since A-Day and B-Day, to start sketching some crime scenes.